Nobody talks about this. After almost 25 years making music and working with music industry pros from singers, engineers, promoters, managers, and studios, things have changed so much. But one thing hasn't: the amount of work that it takes to take a good song idea and launch it into the stratosphere. You see, when I started recording with my band in the 2000s, even though I was producing and writing the songs, I wasn't doing everything myself. We went into a professional studio where the likes of people like Slash and Miles Kennedy were recording. We had a dedicated engineer, and in the band, the drummer was focusing on his parts, the bassist was focusing on the bass, the keyboardist, the guitar player, everybody had their role and contributed to help the album be the very best that it could be. I wasn't carrying the entire process on my own. And if you take a look at some of the major artists, now you're talking about full teams with different producers, engineers, all of these people supporting, and layers upon layers of people involved in getting one song from the idea to something that could change the world. So when you're trying to record and make music yourself, nobody really explains to you all of the things that you have to do. You just want to make music. You know you have something good. You know you have talent. But there is a lot of things that nobody tells you that you need to do or be part of, and have a lot of different skill sets when you're trying to do it all on your own. You're responsible for all of them, whether you realize it or not. And it can be the reason why your song doesn't hit the way you want it to. Not because the idea is bad, but because something along the way just didn't translate. In this video, I want to walk you through the 10 roles that you're actually stepping into when you're recording music for yourself, and each one give you a simple way to think about it and how you can approach it so that you're not just making music, you're finishing it at a level that you can actually be proud of. I'll also tell you which one of these I think makes the biggest impact in your finished song. Songwriting is an essential piece of the puzzle, and this is where everything starts. It's also probably where your passion for music came from in the first place. Picking up a guitar or whatever your instrument is, strumming it for the first time, and the feeling of just being inspired to create something. And for a lot of people, this is actually the part that they want to do the most out of everything. Out of all the roles you end up taking on, this is the one that feels most natural and the most creative, the most you. And that is exactly why it is so important to get this part right. There isn't just one way to be a songwriter. There are endless ways to approach it, depending on the genre, style, intention. But one thing I found that translates across everything is truth. Your ability to pull from your own unique experience and turn it into something that other people can feel and relate to. Because the strongest songwriters in the world across any genre all share that same quality. Whether you think about artists like Taylor Swift or other writers like John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Elton John, what connects all of them is their ability to take personal experiences and turn them into emotion that other people can connect with. And even though their songs may contain very specific moments of their lives, the emotion behind them feels universal. That is the real skill in songwriting, being able to take something personal, something specific to you, and shape it in a way that others can see themselves in it. At the same time, it's important to understand the balance between originality and genre, because while your story matters, so does understanding the space that you're writing in. Different genres have different expectations, different structures, different emotional targets. A great songwriter knows how to blend their own truth with the language of the genre that they're working in. So my biggest tip here is simple: study great songwriters. Not just casually listening, but actually paying attention to how they construct their songs. Take the time to understand structure, intention, and emotion. And most importantly, give yourself space to actually practice writing consistently instead of rushing through it. Set aside real time for it. Treat it like a skill that you are developing, not just as a moment of inspiration. And make sure this piece is solid before you move on to anything else. Production is where your song becomes real. It's the translation of your idea into sound, the choices that shape the emotion, the energy, and ultimately how your track is experienced by other people. This includes everything: sound selection, arrangement, groove, dynamics, texture, All the things that will determine how your song feels, not just what it says. And honestly, this is one of the hardest roles to get right, because unlike songwriting, where the focus is on expression, production is about decision making. It's about taste, knowing what to add and what to leave out, and how to shape something so that it fits within the genre while still feeling fresh and intentional. This is also where a lot of songs either come to life or they fall flat. You can have a great idea, a strong lyric, even really compelling melodies, but if the production doesn't support it in the right way, the song just won't connect the same. And in today's landscape, where the overall level of production is higher than it's ever been, the gap is even more noticeable. So here's the honest takeaway for production. If there's one area of the entire process where it might make sense to collaborate, outsource, or bring in someone who really specializes in it, it's probably this. But that doesn't mean that you have to. But if production isn't your strongest skill, trying to force it can end up holding your song back more than helping it. The goal is simple: to get the best possible version of your song. And sometimes that means recognizing where your strengths are and where someone else might elevate your vision even further. Another role you're stepping into is performer or even session musician. Even if you're not recording live instruments, maybe you're programming drums or playing parts on a MIDI keyboard, you're still responsible for creating a performance. And that's an important distinction, because great records don't just come from good sounds, they come from how those sounds are played. In a traditional studio setting, you'd have session musicians or bandmates whose only job is to focus on delivering the best possible performance, with a producer giving feedback and an engineer handling the recording so that the player can stay locked in on feel, timing, and expression. When you're doing all of that yourself, you don't have that separation. You're the player, you're the producer, you're the engineer all at once. And that makes it much harder to stay focused on what matters the most in that moment. That's why preparation is so important here, because the tighter and the more intentional you are going in, the less you have to think about everything else while you're recording. And the more you can stay focused on actually playing instead of just getting through the part. So the key takeaway here is, no matter what you're using, live instruments, MIDI, or programmed parts, treat it like a performance. Don't just place notes on a grid. Think about energy, dynamics, timing, variation, because those small human details are what makes a track feel alive and ultimately what makes a record connect. So making music yourself, you also have to be your own recording engineer, and it's a much bigger part of the process than most people realize. Before you even get to the performance, you first must make sure that you're actually capturing a great sound. Whether that means miking up a guitar cab, recording vocals, or setting levels, you're responsible for making sure that the source audio is solid from the start. And that matters because everything after this point is built on top of what you record. If the original sound isn't good, there's only so much mixing and processing you can do to save it. You can improve things, but you can't completely rebuild a bad recording into a great one. That's why engineering is such an important skill. It's the foundation that the rest of the track is built on. The challenge, of course, is that while you're also trying to be the songwriter, producer, and performer, now you have to think technically too. So my biggest tip here is to focus on one thing at a time and to prepare before you hit record. Do some research around the session, understand the basics of what you're trying to capture, and have a game plan before you start. For example, if you're recording guitar, spend some time learning a few mic placement techniques and understanding how placement changes tone. The more intentional you are going in, the better your recordings will be, and the less you'll end up relying on trying to fix it in the mix later. Another role you'll step into, especially when it comes to vocals, is being your own performance coach. Any part you record involves performance, but vocals in particular are where this really shows up, because there's usually nobody in the room giving you real-time feedback or helping guide your delivery. That means you have to direct yourself and learn how to pull the best out of your performance and the best out of your own voice, which is harder than it sounds. One of the biggest challenges, what you hear in your own head while you're singing often doesn't match what's actually getting recorded. And hearing that back for the first time can sometimes be surprising. You might think you've nailed a take, only to realize it's off in timing, pitch, or energy. So the key here is to slow down and give yourself time to adjust. Don't just rush through takes. or put too much pressure on getting it perfect immediately. Instead, build in time to listen back as you go, especially early on, so you can understand what you're actually capturing and make real adjustments in the moment. Pay attention to the details like timing, tone, pitch, control, vibrato, and the overall feel. The more you train your ear while recording, the better your performance will get. And while it might take a little bit more time up front, it will save you a lot of frustration and fixing later. So once you have your instruments and your vocals recorded, you're going to have to take on the role of an editor, handling timing, tuning, and overall cleanup after everything is recorded. In a traditional setup, this is usually done by a producer or a mix engineer as part of the process. But when you're working on your own, it becomes your responsibility after the fact. And while editing can absolutely improve a track, it is not a substitute for a great performance. The better your takes are going in, the easier and more natural this stage becomes, and the less you have to rely on heavy correction. That's why it's so important to aim for the best possible performance from the start. Editing should enhance, not completely rebuild. When you get into this phase, it helps to stay organized and intentional instead of just jumping around. So I would say compartmentalize your workflow. Focus on one element at a time, whether it's tightening the drums, aligning the guitars, or tuning the vocals. Build a simple system that you can follow so you're working methodically through the track rather than guessing your way through it. It might not be the most exciting part of the process, but it is a super crucial one, and doing it well is what helps your song feel polished, tight, and professional. All right, this is the big one. Mixing. This is one of the most important stages in the entire process, if not the most. This is where your song either comes together or completely falls apart. Just like production, this is one of those roles where if you're not at a high level yet, it might seriously be worth considering bringing somebody in, because mixing is what takes everything you've done, your songwriting, your production, your performances, and actually turns it into a finished professional sounding record. And I'm telling you from experience, a great mix can transform a song. It's not magic. It's not going to turn a bad song into a hit, but it can absolutely take something that's okay and make it sound good, or take something that's good and push it into great. I've seen it happen, and I've done it myself, taking something that wasn't quite there and elevating it just through the mix. But the opposite is also true. You can have a great idea, a great performance, a great production, but if the mix isn't right, if things are unbalanced, harsh, muddy, or just not sitting correctly, it can make the whole track feel unlistenable. That's why this stage carries so much weight. More than almost anything else, this is what determines how your song actually feels when someone presses play. So if there's one place where you really want to get it right, it's this. Whether that means putting in the time to really learn mixing, or being honest with yourself and bringing in someone who specializes in it. This is the step that lets your song actually reach the level that it deserves. The big tip on this one is, if you don't feel confident in your mixing yet, outsource it and let someone who specializes in it handle this stage. This is not the place where you want to cut corners. Getting the mix right is what ensures your track actually translates and hits the level it's capable of. So it's worth protecting that step at all costs. Now, I know some of you might not agree with me on this one, but a good mastering engineer can really make a huge difference on a track. I've worked with some incredibly talented mastering engineers over the years, and I can say firsthand, they absolutely can elevate a mix and bring that final level of polish, cohesion that takes a track over the top. Now, if there was ever a stage you could potentially cut or combine, mastering is the one people often simplify, because a really strong mix engineer can sometimes get you 90 to 95% of the way to a mastered level sound just on their own. And in some cases, combining mixing and mastering with one engineer can be smart and a cost-effective approach that still delivers great results. That said, if you have the budget, I still think having a dedicated mix engineer and a mastering engineer is important. Mastering is that final set of fresh ears, the last quality check that ensures that your track translates across systems, has the right width, the right loudness and tonal balance, and truly fits the genre that you're aiming for. It's a subtle stage, but it matters. And it's one of those things that helps separate a polished professional release from everything else. That's also why larger artists and labels and top tier productions still invest in proper mastering. It adds the final layer of refinement that you can feel, even if you can't always pinpoint exactly what changed. My tip: don't forget this step. Even if you don't want to use a mastering engineer, do not forget that this step has to be addressed in some fashion by someone. Now, once your song is finished, you've recorded everything, it's mixed and mastered. The next question is, what are you going to do with it? Well, you need artwork, you need imagery, and you need to have a visual identity behind the music to actually push it out into the world. Because let's be real, especially nowadays, image matters more than ever, and the barrier to entry for making music is lower than it's ever been, which means the standard for looking professional has gone way up. People decide incredibly quickly whether something feels legitimate or not, and visuals are a huge part of that first impression. That means you also need to become your own brand manager in the process. You're not just making music, you're shaping how it's perceived. And while there are great tools out there now like Canva and other design platforms that make things a lot more easy and accessible, you still need a clear understanding of your own identity and how you want to present it visually. So the big tip here is, think of yourself as a cohesive brand, not as a collection of songs. Your artwork, your visuals, your name, your sound, they should all feel like they belong in the same world. That doesn't mean that they can't be unique or even a little experimental, but it does mean that there should be consistency and intention behind everything. And if you're unsure of what that looks like, a great exercise is to study artists that you admire and break down how their visual identity supports their music. Now you've got your brand, your song is finished, everything sounds great, but nobody's listening to it. And that's where marketing comes in. Traditionally, if you were signed to a label, this is the part they would handle for you. They have the relationships, the connections, and the infrastructure to get your music in front of the right people. And while that still exists, the reality today is very different. It's easier than ever to release music and get it out into the world, but it's also more saturated than ever, which means standing out is even harder. At the same time, the opportunity is still massive. You can release music instantly, reaching global audiences, and build a fan base without needing permission from anyone, but only if you actually put in the work to get it seen and heard. So here's the key takeaway here. Don't skip past this part. Don't assume the work is done just because the song is finished. Marketing is not optional. It's part of the process. It means promoting your releases, spending a bit more money where it makes sense, reaching out to people, sharing your work, and consistently putting yourself out there and your music in front of people. You are your own marketing engine. There isn't a system that's automatically going to push you forward. For most artists today, especially independent ones, it's on you to drive attention and build momentum. And the truth is, we can make the best song in the world, but if nobody hears it, does it really matter? So now I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Was there anything you feel like I missed in this breakdown? Or maybe something you see differently based on your own experience making music? Let me know in the comments. Also, which of these roles do you feel strongest in? And which ones are the hardest for you? And do you think any of these steps are becoming less important in modern music? Or are they still essential? I'm really curious to hear how other people approach this process because everybody ends up building their workflow a little differently. Appreciate you watching and keep making great music.